Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Shaw coming at you again, this time from the 1990s. Welcome. Let's get right to it. All right, so again, finishing up with President Bush, number one, President H.W. Bush. He served from about he was elected in 1988 and served until about the end of 1992. Again, so probably the biggest thing about his presidency was in 1990, Saddam Hussein actually invaded the country of Kuwait. So again, he led an invasion. Again, here he was the leader of Iraq. And so he invaded Kuwait. This was a very, a very oil-rich area. And this was just, again, it was seen as they had access to, to the Persian Gulf here as well. So he wanted it. He invaded and he took it. Again, there was widespread opposition to this invasion across the world. Again, Margaret Thatcher, was the Prime Minister of Great Britain at the time. She said, "We must win this. We cannot give in to dictators. And if he succeeds, others may try the same thing." And so this was really important for a lot of democratic countries around the world because they wanted to make sure that we weren't going to kind of get into another Soviet Union situation, like we had, at the end of the Cold War, or even perhaps another World War II situation. So this leads to Operation Desert Storm, which is going to take place in January of 1991. Congress actually was very hesitant about supporting this. Again, you think of the last time we did this was in Vietnam, and it really didn't turn out well. So Congress narrowly backed armed intervention, and the war itself was actually pretty short. They were able to liberate Kuwait in just about 100 hours. So just, a couple days. About 100,000 Iraqis died, and the U.S. only lost about 146 soldiers. And one thing that was kind of a moderate failure was they signed an armistice to end the fighting in the Persian Gulf War. However, some people wanted us to kind of continue into Iraq and actually try to depose Saddam Hussein for what he did, and that really conflicted with a lot of Americans. They didn't like necessarily deposing the leader of a different country just because we didn't disagree with his, or we did disagree with his actions. So anyway, the armistice allowed Saddam to remain in power, and that is going to continue until the early 2000s. This is going to really just push Bush's approval rating over 90%. Again, he actually has one of the highest approval ratings that any president has seen because of the Persian Gulf War. And unfortunately, though, he is not going to win re-election in 1992. And again, it doesn't really cover it here in the slide, but what you should know is that in 1988, when George H.W. Bush was running for president, he said, he literally said this quote. He said, "Read my lips, no new taxes," and then of course, life happens. Life gets in the way. They throws you a curveball, and he ended up having to raise taxes. Things were expensive. The Persian Gulf War, raising that money and things like that. It was all it was challenging, and so he did raise taxes, and Americans don't like taxes, and he was not reelected. That's basically what happened. Again, Bush was challenged by Buchanan for the Republican ticket. That's not super important. Democrats are going to nominate a charming moderate, which is Bill Clinton. Again, he is one of the youngest people that we've seen enter the presidency since JFK. Ross Perot is going to run as a third party on the Reform Party, and you see he doesn't win any of the electoral vote, but he actually wins almost 20 million votes, which is really relevant. He won about half of the votes that Bush did, and a little under half of what Clinton did. So this is, I mean, he had a big impact. And honestly, Ross Perot is, a lot of people had people not voted for him and instead had voted for either of the, or, had instead voted for Bush, they would have, Bush definitely wouldn't have won the election. Again, so this and Democrats nominating Clinton is on really purposeful, because Democrats had lost the last three elections. They lost in 1980, 1984, and 1988. So in 1992, instead of they tried to kind of shift a little bit further, maybe towards the middle, and try to attract more, in independents that might lean Republican. And that's what happened. And so he was able to win, and here we go. Bill Clinton, let's do it. So he's going to serve for 2 terms. Let's talk about his domestic issues here. So the first thing that he does is he signs the Family Medical Leave Act. Not the first thing. This is just one of the things that he did. And this is really important because the United States is actually the only it's the only well-developed country that doesn't have paid paternity and maternity leave. And so basically, people were, before the Family Medical Leave Act, people were women were getting pregnant, or fathers were taking off for the birth of a child or the adoption of a child. And they could get fired for that. There was nothing preventing businesses from firing people or bringing them back after that, their paternity or maternity leave was concluded and they wanted to come back to work. So this was really this is really important, and we kind of deal with this today still as well, just because we still don't have paid maternity or paternity leave, and it really affects a lot of families. So Clinton, in an attempt to, trying to ease this burden, he passed what's called the Family Medical Leave Act, which is where workers may take up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave due to the birth or adoption of a child, and they cannot be fired from their jobs because of it. Okay, so that might be something good to add there. It's not great. It's nice to not lose your job. But again, when you look at the benefits of other countries, it's just really not even comparable. So we still do have this today. And when Walker was born, I had to make sure to sign FMLA paperwork to make sure that I wasn't going to lose my job when I came back. And I was able to use my sick time for that, so I actually was still able to get paid. But it's technically not getting paid because I had to use my sick days. It's a whole big thing. Anyway. So the next thing that is really important was the Brady Bill, and so you guys are not really strangers to the idea of gun violence in America. In the 1980s, though, really actually we've been kind of going back to the 1970s, 80s, and then the 90s, gun violence in America was on the rise. And the Brady Bill was actually called the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act. So one thing I didn't talk about with Reagan is just because it's not super relevant to us, is that there was actually an assassination attempt against him, and there was one of the Secret Service members was of the last name Brady, and he actually died in defense of Reagan during that attack. And so anyway, the Brady Bill imposed a wait period and background checks on the purchase of handguns. And this is relevant because a lot of people thought that this was kind of the big Second Amendment argument. Is this a violation of the Second Amendment? Because now if you can't pass a background check, you're not going to be able to obtain a handgun, and you have to wait a certain amount of time in order to get that handgun. So again, it kind of depends on the state you live in. Like in Missouri, it's not there's not really there's not a waiting period anymore. But that you can go and you still have to pass a background check. But that has definitely been kind of dialed back a little bit, especially in recent years, as the gun debate and what to do about the gun violence in America has really heated up. So the last thing, that is a really big domestic issue, is we have our first domestic terrorist attack. And this was the Oklahoma City bombing. About 168 people died, 800 were injured. And this was done by Timothy McVeigh, who is an extreme right-wing terrorist. So quick background on Timothy McVeigh. In Waco, Texas, there was basically a community, a small community of people, again you can call it a convent or like a cult as well, that the government raided in the early 90s, and they essentially just, I mean, again, these people were living their lives like they were. There were rumors of the leader of the cult or whatever, like basically, having sex with all of these different people, and even like young women, teens and so on and so forth, and kind of just taking advantage of them in certain ways. And so the government there was an issue with firearms. They were known to have firearms on the premises, and the government invaded, and they basically essentially like broke up this community in Waco. And so Timothy McVeigh saw that, and he was just shocked. He hated it. He couldn't believe that the government did that. He believed that the government should be as small as possible, really, like that they shouldn't hardly exist at all. And so this is a government building that he is going to bomb. He basically rolled a van up full of explosives to the front of this building here. The really sad thing about this, and again, obviously this is sad in general, but the very first floor of this building actually housed the preschool for the people in the building. So of those 168, I think about 20, maybe even a little bit higher, that were actually just children. So anyway, this is really going to open America's eyes to like the issues of terrorism, but again, this is this is a domestic incident. This is an American that is causing this, so that's going to be super relevant to us as well, and kind of lead us into the issues that we're dealing with today when we think about school shootings and things like that. All right, so one of the big agreement that was done during Clinton's presidency was NAFTA. It's called the North American Free Trade Agreement. So again, it's between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. And there's a lot of pros here. Basically, it lowers tariffs and lowers prices between the three countries. So now, essentially, we are not going to be treating each of these countries as separate countries anymore when it comes to trading. So there's not really going to be any tariffs anymore, which means that people are going to be more willing to trade and lower their prices like between the countries. The United States is going to, and Canada and Mexico are going to like create economic support. They're going to help support each other. Again, this is controversial in America mostly because the United States was the most powerful country and is the most powerful country of the three. So, and I mean most powerful like economically. So, this is, some people think that this is kind of like the United States, like kind of propping up Mexico and then maybe just kind of working in a kind of a little tiny deal with Canada. But again, Canada is a powerful country economically. They are a very large country. They have a very powerful economy as well. It just happens to not be as powerful as the United States. It opened the markets, meaning that there's going to be more products available to the people in these three, in between these three countries. And it's going to help reduce Mexican poverty. Again, like I said, Mexico was really struggling and is really kind of still struggling at this time. And so the idea for NAFTA was, hey, like if we can, help Mexico become a better country, perhaps there won't be perhaps maybe not as many people would want to leave Mexico for the United States if Mexico is a better place to live. So the cons though are still there. Again, there's going to be some jobs relocated. Specifically, mostly a lot of companies are going to move jobs from the United States or Canada to Mexico because there's lower wages there. Again, they don't have to deal with so many regulations as they do in the United States and Canada. So American jobs, Canadian jobs are going to move. It's going to also increase competition for prices. Again, if you have to lower your prices to in order to compete with other countries, like you're not going to make as big of a profit theoretically. So that's going to that's going to be relevant as well. It may lead to increased in illegal immigration. again, the hard part with this is that most illegal immigrants, most immigrants that are illegal, they come to this country legally and then they overstay their visa. So again, that's kind of a weaker argument as far as a con goes for the North American Free Trade Agreement. However, it could be argued that that does happen. And then there is also an increase in environmental hazards. For example, in Mexico, like I mentioned, the lack of regulations or the less regulations. So, for example, like trucks, factories, they are not going to have as many restrictions as they do in the United States, and that could potentially harm workers, kind of like we talked about back in the industrialization period for America. That like workers aren't going to have the protections that they do in the United States and Canada. Okay, one big thing for Clinton's foreign policies was in Yugoslavia there was something, again, it was they called it ethnic cleansing in 1998. Again, there were and I don't want to get super bogged down in the details here, because it's relevant in the sense that Clinton was able to negotiate kind of not an end to it, but he was able to negotiate an end to it, but also he was very instrumental in helping a lot of people that were affected by this come to America, a lot of the refugees. So in Yugoslavia, Bosnian Serbs attacked Muslims and Croatians, and the Serbians also bombed Sarajevo. And again, this was just really, really terrible for the Muslims that were in Bosnia and Yugoslavia, and the Croatians as well. So Clinton encouraged NATO to intervene. Again, remember NATO was created during the early Cold War, to kind of combat the rise in communism, or the spreading of communism. He's going to actually lead to it. He's going to help negotiate the peace agreement here between Bosnia and Yugoslavia. And then he's also, as I mentioned, he's also going to allow a lot of refugees to come to the United States. Actually, St. Louis has a pretty large Bosnian population, and many of them came in the 90s to escape the ethnic cleansing that was happening in their country. Okay. Also, the European Union is going to be created during this time to promote economic and political cooperation among European nations. Again, very similar to NAFTA. The European Union now is it's not going to treat, economically anyway, it's not going to treat Great Britain and France and Germany as separate countries. There's not going to be tariffs anymore. They're going to kind of all work together. Although this is actually relevant because Great Britain had just voted to leave the European Union, and that is very relevant now because it's not going to be as easy to travel in Europe anymore. Not as easy to trade, all kinds of stuff like that. They also created a common bank and common currency, which is, again, good for the economy. And there's so many powerful countries in Europe, so it's really good for the global economy. The Kyoto Protocol was also done during this time. This is an agreement to reduce emissions. However, the United States did not sign the agreement. And again, that is most probably because the influence of a lot of businesses during that time. When you talk about reducing emissions, that is going to cut into the profits of businesses, and different things like that. Car companies are going to have to figure out ways to reduce emissions. But again, in general, it's going to refer to, bigger corporations that, they're not willing to kind of sacrifice the money, in order to reduce emissions. Again, it's now we're seeing the same kind of argument between the interests of the big business and the environmental side of things, where we want to protect the environment, but also corporations are really going to want to keep as much of their money as they can. In 96, the election of 1996, basically the only thing you need to know is that the economy was awesome in the early 90s, and Clinton was easily reelected over the Republican Bob Dole. Perot did run, but he didn't do as well. He only got about 8 million votes this time. And so, again, that's it. The economy dominated. That's all you need to know. Clinton wins again. Now, the biggest thing of his last of the second term is there in 1990 there was a sexual harassment case. I'm sorry. So there was a sexual harassment case in 1990 while Clinton was the governor of Arkansas. And so this came to light in 1998, and the prosecutor known as Ken Starr investigated Clinton. And what you need to understand is that this is, Clinton kind of had a past of, of sexual harassment. And this, once it came to light in 1998, they realized that he had actually had an affair with a White House intern known as Monica Lewinsky. That was her name. That is her name. She's still alive. Because of this affair, he lied under oath, and that was the first charge, is that the perjury charge, and then the obstruction of justice as well, because of the lying and because he did not come forward and did not tell what was happening. He was obstructing justice. He was standing in the way of the investigation. So the Republicans controlled the House of Representatives, who controls impeachment, and they decided to go ahead and file articles of impeachment against him. The Senate, however, you need 2/3 of the senators. You need about 67 senators in order to remove the president or remove anybody, and they could not get that 67 majority, so he was easily acquitted in 1999, and he served out the rest of his term, albeit not quite as powerfully as his first couple years in office. Again, not just finishing up here. I think this is the last slide. Yep. So 90s, guys, was a crazy time for technology. Again, the internet was rising. We have all kinds of new ways to communicate. Cell phones are coming out. Friends was there. I mean, so obviously that's awesome. So again, just not anything specific for you to know. I would just kind of know that in general, when we talk about the 90s, we talk about it as the information age. We talk about it as like the globalization period in America. So there's just a lot of things that are going on, and this technology is really affecting American life, and changing it in ways that we kind of never thought possible before. So anyway, that's the 90s, guys. I appreciate you. Catch you later.